Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of the U-Talk Show with our special guest, Ken Enderby, the president of Climate Action Burwood Canada Bay, an all-round incredibly wise man. Today, we are asking the question, how would you start your own action group? So far, we've talked about, why you should get involved with me and Horst. Then, me and Ken have talked about how can you get involved in a very productive way, and what does it look like when you get involved. And so say, you want to get involved, but there's, no action group about what you care about. Say you care about, I don't know, kittens on every street corner or kitten photos on every street corner. How do you start an action group for that? If there are none in the local area. So, Ken, what does it look like to start your own action group, and what kind of structure should that group have?
Okay, well, I just gave a talk to a group in Melbourne that are considering starting up their own climate group. And the first thing to do is to have a group of people, get people together first who might be interested in starting up such a group. Don't try to do things just on your own. So there were, I think, a dozen people at this meeting that I addressed last week. So four areas you've got to think about. It's things you've got to settle before you even get started. Think about infrastructure that you're going to need in order to be able to function, some basic things that you can do, and some pitfalls you want to avoid. They're the four things. So the questions you've got to ask before you even
So to recap, because I think I heard three things there. So
okay,
you got to get a group of people. You gotta
okay,
sorry,
so there's a bunch of questions you've got to
right?
consider before you even get started.
Yep.
Then you've got to look at what basic infrastructure you need in order to be able to operate. Some things that you can do that aren't going to exhaust everybody. How do you get the maximum bang for your buck?
Okay.
And finally, some pitfalls you really need to avoid.
All right. So, basically figure out the questions you need answered, figure out the infrastructure you're going to need, such as like a shared file system, for example, and a communication sort of
I'll go through
those things. Then third one, sorry, my memory is not working well tonight.
Third one is what sort of basic activities can you do that will give you maximum bang for your buck? So you'll get maximum effect for the least amount of input when you get started.
Yeah,
the least amount of effort.
Yeah, and the fourth one are pitfalls. How do you
pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah. All right. So let's break it down. How does that first one go?
All right. Well, we'll look at what kind of questions to ask first. We'll assume that you've talked to various people through social media or actually meeting them around the place, and you've got a group of people, a dozen people who want to do this. Okay. So the first thing you've got to look at a bunch of questions. What kind of group do you want it to be? We talked about this in the first episode that I did with you. Is it a protest group, an education group, a lobby group, or a combination of all three? You got to look at what are the group's goals? What are you trying to achieve? What exactly do you want to do? Now, in the case of my own group, Climate Action, our own group, Climate Action Burwood Canada Bay, the two key goals are to educate the public to the point where the political parties will get rewarded electorally when they take significant action, and then talk to the politicians and work with them to get the action that we need. So that second one is, what are the goals? What are you trying to achieve? And look, it may be that you don't know the answers to a number of these questions. Climate Action Burwood Canada Bay certainly didn't know the answer to all of these questions when it started. It wasn't until probably a year and a half ago when we really settled on what we were and what we were doing. The third question is, are you non-political, or are you going to be aligned with a political party? Now, if you're going to be non-political, then you can attract all sort of people to the group, but you won't have the resources that aligning with a political party might give you. There are climate groups that are aligned with the Greens. We are not one of those groups. We have people who are members of the Greens in our group. We have a Greens member on each of two of our three local councils who are members of our group. But we're not actually aligned directly with the Greens. We're not aligned with anybody. So the fourth question is your group going to be idealistic or pragmatic? Now, idealistic means that you're only going to advocate for policies that you really want. You're going to ask for exactly what it is you want, or are you going to ask for something less in the hope that you can get some action? So in the case of climate, what the science says we need to do is nothing like what is being done at the moment. What's being done at the moment is only a fraction of what we need. But we are working with the political parties to get some action. In other words, we're looking at, well, what is realistic to get, even if it isn't going to solve the problem completely at the moment, because we need something. And a
Need to
good
make a
example
start,
where
need to make a start, get the ball rolling, and
right.
maybe it can improve over time.
That's right. A good example of where this failed was back in 2009, when the Greens voted down the ETS because the ETS was seen as inadequate to what they regarded as necessary in order to fix the climate problem. Now, a group like us would say that was the wrong move, because we would say you have to introduce a policy in a way that's ineffectual, not ineffective, ineffectual. Nobody's going to notice it. Doesn't matter if it's not going to solve the problem at that stage, because once it's in, you start to ramp it up to a point where it will solve the problem. Had we had an ETS, an emissions trading system,
kind of like compound interests. I've been reading this book recently called The Slight Edge. The entire premise of the book is that taking small actions day by day adds up like compound interest. If you exercise a little bit each day, then you're healthier over the long term. If you save up a little bit of money each day, adds up to a lot over the long term, and it's a very much a snowball effect.
That's right. So are you idealistic or pragmatic? Climate Action Berwick Canada Bay, our own group, is pragmatic. The fifth question is how the group's going to be based. Is it going to be member-based or supporter-based, or a combination of both? Member-based means that you join up, you pay money to join, and only people who paid money are a part of the group. Supporter-based means anybody can join, it's free. We have a combination of both. Member-based, if you pay your money, you can vote for the committee or stand for the committee. Anybody else can be a part of the group in any way they want, but they can't stand for the committee. And that leads us on to the last question, which is, what's the organisation's structure going to be? At the start, you don't really need a structure. We didn't have any formal positions at all for the first 3 years. It was just whoever turned up at a meeting was making the decisions, with one person guiding the whole thing. Not me at that stage, I should point out. Later, we formed up with a proper committee, an elected committee. And now in our group, the committee has all the power. It's elected, and it's the only group that can actually make decisions. But we consult with everybody else. The bigger you get, the more centralized you need the decision-making to be.
Yeah, so actually on that, if I can, have you seen the show The Newsroom?
No.
Okay, so it's a show, HBO show, and it's about a news anchor and his team and all that. And they're interviewing someone from the what was it, Occupy Wall Street, I think it was called. And so on this sort of fictional show, they're organizing. They're talking to someone who's kind of an organizer, but they're talking, and it's expressed / found out that the Occupy Wall Street movement doesn't really have any leadership, and it doesn't have like a proper end goal. There's a lot of people, but there isn't really a clear idea of what they're doing or meant to be doing. And and essentially he kind of roasts them for it. In a manner of speaking, saying how he doesn't see the value in a group with no leadership, no clear goals, and no clear demands that they're making. And that it's very ineffective. And so, I think that kind of, in a way, shows
when groups start, they don't necessarily know everything about how it's all going to play out. You learn by experience what works and what doesn't work, and eventually you say, "Oh, well, this is what we are." And as I say, Climate Action Berwick Canada Bay, we kind of worked out what we were towards about the beginning of last year, I think, it really started to gel. Now, then I think we probably should move on to the next bit or we'll run out of time.
Yeah,
So
we've got
what
about
sort
2 minutes left, so yeah.
2 minutes? Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Speed run this. Let's go.
All right. So what sort of infrastructure do you need? Well, not much at the start. You pretty much need a name, a logo, and a very good logo. If you can get a really good logo from the very start, that's great because it can then define who you are. Get a professional designer to design your logo like we did. And then you can have everything that you make can be in that same color scheme, that same design, and it becomes your brand. Work out how your decisions are going to be made, even if that just means anyone who turns up at a meeting can be making the decisions. Get an email account so you can be contacted, and a Facebook page to get the word out because it's free, easy to put together. They're the key things that you need. After that, it's, you can build the rest as you get bigger, like the website, the letterhead, the Zoom account, somewhere where you can meet. You can meet online initially, but in the end, you've got groups are going to need a place where you can actually formally meet each other. Groups eventually get banners made, flyers made, a bank account, a newsletter, business cards,
a lot of paperwork, it sounds
system.
like. A lot of paperwork and a lot of figuring things out.
We're at a point now where we've got our own Square reader to take electronic payments, battery to power anyone's phone taking pictures, and the Square reader and so on. We own a lot of infrastructure. We've got our own marquee. We've got call flutes.
Okay, you mean canopy? The canopy?
Yeah, it's
gazebo.
Yeah, we've got all
there's like 3 names for it.
We've got all the things that we really need to function, but it's taken us these years in order to acquire all those things. And one simple way that a group, you can apply to local councils to get grants. So we've had grants from local councils. We've had several grants altogether, and a grant can get you started. You apply for something to do a project, you purchase some infrastructure, and then once you get a little bit bigger, you can start putting on bigger fundraising activities, which raises you serious money, which you can then spend on buying all the other infrastructure that suddenly turn you into a really effective group. But the main piece of advice, don't lose heart. It's very easy to lose heart in the early days. When we were a half a dozen people sitting around a table thinking, what on earth can we do? It was very easy at that time to lose heart, particularly prior to the bushfires, when there was really not much happening here or in the rest of the world on climate action. Now, this is completely different. We're seeing a renewable energy revolution happening in the United States, in Europe, and particularly in China. It's slow getting started here, but it is happening here as well.
Yeah,
so there's
it kind of reminds me of a...
Be positive.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me...
Never get stuck with negativity.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of those old proverbs, about like seeds, just a tiny little seed can grow into a mighty tree. Like the humble acorn grows into the mighty oak.
Well, it does. You never know at what point things are going to take off. They take off when you start to get the right people joining you. And as you get bigger and more effective, people start to join who can really do things. So we now have a very effective committee with people on it with great expertise who know exactly what they're doing. And so we almost function like a professional organization. The other thing that groups need, most community groups that are volunteers are run by retirees, because retarees have time on their hands and expertise. So our committee
that's actually something I noticed I've noticed this about different political parties, different political groups, because I've kind of interacted with quite a great deal of them. And a lot of them either had only young people or only older people, whereas Climate Action Board Canada Bay has a widespread, we've got people who are as young as about early 20s, and people who are, much older, like yourself, retired. And, I think having that sort of broad swath of people has very much helped, sort of.
Our committee's youngest member is 23. Our committee's youngest member is 23. oldest member is in their 70s. So we've got a very wide range of people. We've got 4 retirees and 3 people who are working on the committee. And of course, the retirees do the bulk of the grunt work because we've got the time to do it. The people who work, on the other hand, have an equal say in what's going on. It's just that they don't have the equal amount of time to put into it. They're working. They've got responsibilities.
And all of that, again, I think I said it last episode, but I'll say it again. I find it all to be very inspiring and absolutely amazing to be a part of. Thank you, Ken, for doing yet another episode. And we might see you in another episode. We'll figure that out now. But for now, thank you so much for watching. And again, for Ken for doing this episode. And have a great day.